There is this specific kind of cognitive dissonance that happens when pop culture meets the Bible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's actually kind of funny when you stop and really think about it,
Oh,
because you have this song that gets stuck in your head. Maybe it's that disco version by Boney M that everyone danced to in the
right.
70s.
Or even just a relaxed reggae cover.
Yeah, or just a sweet melodic hymn you heard sitting in a church pew.
It's catchy. It really has that rhythm. You know, the By the Rivers of Babylon that we sat down, it sounds like a campfire song.
Exactly. It feels safe and nostalgic. But here's the thing that stops me in my tracks every single time I actually open the text.
Because it doesn't stay safe.
No, it really doesn't. If you read Psalm 137 all the way to the end, past those famous melodic opening lines, the music doesn't just stop, it crashes.
Yeah, the melody just vanishes completely.
And it ends with, and I'm not exaggerating here, a wish for revenge
Yeah,
that is so violent and so graphic. I mean, it involves infants and rocks.
it's brutal.
Most people just want to cover their ears and pretend it isn't in the Bible at all.
It is absolutely the part of the text that gets skipped over in the Sunday lectionary. I mean, pastors usually read the first few verses and get to the part about the harps and then just say, the word of the Lord.
Right. They just leave out the brutal ending.
Because it is deeply offensive to modern ears.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's scary.
So that is our mission for today. We are looking at a source that refuses to skip the scary part. We're doing a deep dive into a sermon delivered just last year in October 2025 by Philip Gibson.
Titled, By the Rivers We Remember.
Yes, and I want to be clear right up front for you listening. This isn't just a history lesson about ancient poetry.
No, not at all. If you think this is just about ancient history, you're missing the whole point.
This is a deep dive into the psychology of trauma and the absolute necessity of rage and what Gibson calls sacred resistance.
It is a fascinating piece of work because it reframes what we think we know about prayer. The source argues that this ancient text, written in the wake of total societal collapse, is actually teaching us something vital about how we handle memory.
And the core idea here is wild. The source basically argues that forgetting isn't a way to move on. It's actually a form of submission to evil.
Right, and remembering even when it hurts is a way of fighting back.
Precisely. So our plan is to unpack why this specific psalm exists and why it gets so dark, and why the source believes that true healing only happens when we refuse to let the victors write the story.
Okay, let's get into it.
To really understand why this text is so heavy, we have to go back, way back. Set the scene for us. Where are we in history when this is actually written?
Well, we are in the early 6th century BCE, roughly 580 years before Christ. This is the era of the Neo-Babylonian exile.
Okay.
But we need to be really careful with that word exile.
Right, because exile can sound a bit sterile, like someone just got sent to their room or officially deported.
Yeah.
But the source paints a much bloodier picture.
Much bloodier. This was a brutal military campaign led by King Nebuchadnezzar II against Jerusalem, and it wasn't quick.
It was a siege, right?
Yeah, the city was surrounded for months, totally cut off from food and supplies. The people were starved into submission. We are talking about famine and disease and the complete breakdown of social order inside the walls.
And then the walls come down.
The Babylonians didn't just take over. They annihilated the city. They tore the walls down. They burned the temple, which you have to understand wasn't just a church for them.
It was everything.
It was the center of their entire universe, their economic, political, and spiritual hub. Just gone.
And then they forcibly marched the survivors, the Judeans, hundreds of miles away to Babylon. So when the psalm says, by the rivers of Babylon, this isn't some vacation spot.
No, it's a refugee camp,
Right.
or a prisoner of war camp.
They are literally sitting in the wreckage of their previous lives.
Exactly. But there is another layer to the trauma that the source highlights, and this is a detail I think a lot of people miss. It's the villain in the background.
Oh, right, the Edomites.
Yes, the Edomites.
This part really struck me in the reading. So the Edomites weren't the Babylonians. They were actually neighbors to Judah. They were considered kin or relatives in the region.
They were. But the text says, remember Edom. And Gibson points out that this is a specific cry against betrayal, because when the walls of Jerusalem were falling, the Edomites didn't help.
They cheered.
They cheered.
That is just cold.
It is devastating. The source references the prophet Obadiah and Psalm 137, verse 7. The Edomites were shouting, tear it down, raise it to the foundations.
Wow.
So the trauma isn't just that the enemy won, it's that your neighbors, your own relatives, stood by and gloated while your world collapsed.
It adds this whole other layer of bitterness. It's not just defeat. It's betrayal.
Right.
So now you have these exiles sitting by the river, traumatized and betrayed. And then the captors do something that just twists the knife.
Yeah, they demand a song.
This is, sing us one of those happy songs from Zion.
And think about the power dynamic there. This isn't a request for a concert. It's pure mockery.
It's taunting.
It's basically saying, entertain us with your culture while we destroy your home. It's a demand for the victims to perform for the victors, to make the victors feel good about their conquest.
It's cultural appropriation at the point of a spear.
That's a really good way to put it. And this is where the sacred resistance comes in. The source focuses heavily on their refusal.
They don't sing.
No, they hang their harps on the willow trees.
It's a protest, like a labor strike almost, saying we will not normalize this.
Exactly. And that leads to one of the most intense oaths in the entire Bible. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither.
Okay, I want to pause on this, because in this source, Gibson really digs into what this actually means. Let my right hand wither. It sounds poetic to us, almost Shakespearean.
But it's not just poetry.
Right? There is a very practical, almost terrifying meaning behind it for the speaker.
It is incredibly specific symbolism. Think about who is speaking here. These are musicians, Levites likely. For a musician, the right hand is everything.
It's their livelihood.
It represents their skill, their power, their actual ability to pluck the strings of the harp.
So by saying, let my right hand wither, they are saying, I would rather lose my career, my art, my ability to provide.
It goes even deeper. The verse continues, let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. That means losing the physical ability to sing or speak.
Wow.
The source explains that the deeper meaning here is, may I be physically paralyzed and silenced before I ever use my gift to entertain the people who destroyed my home.
That is so powerful. It's not just sadness, it's a defiant pledge of loyalty. It's saying, I will not betray my memory just to make things comfortable for you.
And that refusal to be comfortable or compliant brings us to the elephant in the room, the ending of the song.
Yeah, we have to talk about it. The rage, the violence.
The source identifies this as an imprecatory psalm.
Imprecatory. That is a $10 theological word. Break that down for us.
It comes from the Latin for to pray against or to invoke evil upon. It's basically a spoken curse.
Okay.
And Psalm 137 ends with the mother of all curses.
It's grim. It talks about dashing little ones against the rocks. It is horrific imagery.
It really is.
And I think the natural reaction for a modern listener, especially if you grew up thinking of the Bible as a book of nice moral lessons,
Yeah.
is to say, whoa, that shouldn't be in there. That's evil.
It is a shocking image.
Yeah.
But here is the crucial distinction the source makes. And this is where it gets really interesting psychologically. This plea is directed to God.
Wait, so it's not a call for a mob to go out and do it?
No.
Yeah.
And that changes everything. Gibson argues that by handing this desire for revenge over to God, the cycle of human violence is technically broken.
Ah, I see.
The psalmist isn't planning a terrorist attack. They aren't gathering weapons. The psalmist is praying.
So they're taking this radioactive material, this raw, unfiltered hatred and grief, and instead of acting on it, they were just dumping it at God's feet.
Precisely. The source argues that in extreme situations like watching your city burn and your children die, grief and rage are inseparable.
You can't separate them.
You cannot have one without the other. If you look at monstrous evil and feel nothing, that is the actual problem.
Gibson says something like, the worst possible response to evil is not anger, but indifference.
Yes. To feel nothing is to let evil become ordinary, to just shrug it off. This song is the exact opposite of a shrug. It is a scream.
It's so visceral.
It validates the fact that trauma breaks us, and it creates these ugly, violent feelings. The text doesn't sanitize the victim's experience at all.
It really challenges the way we think about prayer, doesn't it? I mean, usually we think prayer is supposed to be polite. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, but bless this food. We edit ourselves before we even start praying.
Right. Nice and soft-spoken. Fit for a Sunday morning service. But Gibson's sermon is arguing for a theology of honest prayer.
A theology of honest prayer. I like that.
It is about radical honesty. The source quotes James Lowry, noting that prayer is offering our whole selves to God, not just the nice part.
And messy parts, too.
If you are full of rage and you hide that from God, you aren't really praying. You're performing.
Yeah.
You're putting on a mask for the divine.
Which is ironic because the whole point of God is that he supposedly knows everything anyway.
Exactly. And that's where the source brings in this Wesleyan theological framework to explain how God handles that rage. I thought this was really helpful for understanding the mechanics of this.
Yeah, walk us through that. The source mentions 3 types of grace.
First, there is prevenient grace. This is the idea that God is already present, already knowing the rage is there before you even speak it.
Okay.
You aren't surprising God with your anger. He was there when the trauma happened.
You don't have to break the news to him that you're angry. He already knows.
Right. Then there is justifying grace. This is the idea that God accepts you, rage and all. You don't have to clean yourself up to be heard. God can forgive the bitterness.
And the third one?
Finally, sanctifying grace.
That's the transformation part, right?
That's the goal. The idea is that when we bring those raw feelings, even the ugly ones about dashing infants against rocks, when we bring them honestly before God, that is the only way God can begin to transform them. You can't heal what you don't reveal.
Man, that is profound. So the silence, the whole moving on or let's just forget about it, that is actually the enemy of healing.
Silence and indifference are the real enemies here. If you bury that rage, it rots inside you. Or worse, it comes out sideways later against innocent people. By vocalizing it in prayer, you are effectively disarming it.
This connects directly to the central theme of the source, which is memory as resistance. This is where the sermon pivots to the modern day.
Yeah.
I want to be clear here for you listening. The source brings up some heavy topics from our current political and social landscape.
It does, and it's important to note we are just reporting the arguments made in the sermon here. Gibson connects the ancient struggle of the exiles to modern attempts to minimize trauma.
Right.
The source explicitly mentions things like burning cities, banning books, and tearing down heritage sites or statues.
The argument Gibson makes is that these actions, whether it's erasing a statue or banning a book, are attempts to tidy up the story, to make it less offensive, to make the history nice again.
And the source argues that we must resist that. It draws a very powerful parallel to Holocaust survivors.
Yeah, that really landed for me.
Think about it. Survivors of the Holocaust didn't build museums and record their testimonies just to be bitter. They didn't do it to ruin everyone's day.
No, of course not.
They did it because, as the source says, to forget is to submit to evil.
To remember is to choose life. That's the quote.
It is. If you wipe away the memory of the trauma, you pave the way for it to happen again. If you pretend the Holocaust or slavery or war crimes didn't happen, or if you try to make them sound not that bad, you are doing the work of the oppressor.
Like the exiles hanging up their harps. They're saying, we will not play happy songs while the reality is tragedy. We will not act like everything is fine when it clearly isn't.
Exactly. The refusal to tidy up the story is an act of spiritual resistance. It's saying that truth matters more than comfort.
And for you listening, this raises a tough question. Are we pressured to forget things in our own lives? Are we pressured to smooth things over just to keep the peace?
It's that can't we all just get along mentality. Sometimes getting along requires lying about what happened, and the source says, don't lie.
That's a big challenge. But I want to move to how the source resolves this, because this is a Christian sermon, right?
Yes.
And usually Christianity is associated with forgiveness and turning the other cheek. So how do you go from smashing infants on rocks to the New Testament?
It is a difficult bridge to build, but Gibson does it by connecting the psalm to the cross.
Okay, walk us through that. Because on the surface, Jesus seems like the exact opposite of Psalm 137.
Well, first, the source points out that Jesus didn't shy away from lament. He said, blessed are those who mourn. He dignified grief. He wept when his friend Lazarus died.
He didn't just tell everyone to cheer up.
Right. He didn't just say, it's fine, he's in a better place. He cried.
So he validated the pain.
He validated the pain. But then look at Jesus on the cross. The source argues he is essentially living out Psalm 137.
Ouch, so.
He is being mocked. He is in agonizing pain. He is surrounded by enemies who are gloating, just like the Edomites were doing.
But his reaction is completely different.
It is. He feels the pain. He acknowledges the injustice, but instead of calling for their children to be dashed on rocks, he entrusts the judgment entirely to God. He says, Father, forgive them.
So he takes that exact same mechanism, handing the injustice over to God, but the outcome is forgiveness rather than a curse.
Right. But, and this is key, he doesn't pretend the injustice didn't happen.
He doesn't minimize it.
He doesn't say it's no big deal. He acknowledges it, fully feels the absolute weight of it, and then hands it to God. He breaks the cycle of vengeance by absorbing the violence rather than reflecting it back out.
And that leads to the final point about memory. Communion.
Yes. The Christian ritual of communion. Do this in remembrance of me.
It's really interesting to think of communion as a memory act. I usually think of it as just a church ritual.
It is the ultimate memory act. The source argues that this ritual shifts memory from a place of pure trauma to a place of redemption. We remember a death, a violent, unjust execution, but in remembering it correctly, it becomes the source of new life.
So if we forget the death, we lose the life.
Exactly. If you sanitize the cross, if you make it just a pretty piece of jewelry and forget it was an instrument of torture, you lose the power of the resurrection. You have to remember the bad thing to get to the good thing.
Wow, that really reframes the whole concept. It's not just about dwelling on the past. It's about using the past to fuel the future.
It transforms the past. It doesn't erase it.
Okay, so let's zoom out here. We have gone from a dusty riverbank in 580 BCE
Yeah.
to the psychology of rage, to modern book bans, and finally to the communion table. What is the big takeaway here for someone listening who maybe isn't in a massive crisis right now, but wants to be wiser about how they handle life?
For me, it is the validation of the whole human experience. We so often feel like we have to edit ourselves before we approach the divine, or even before we approach our friends.
We have to have it all together.
Right. We have to be calm and collected and polite. We have to be over it.
Yeah.
This source says no. God can handle your grief. God can even handle your rage.
And not only can he handle it, but burying it is actually dangerous.
Rage belongs before God, not buried or weaponized. That's the quote I just keep coming back to. If you bury it, it rots. If you weaponize it, you hurt others. If you bring it to God, if you give it a voice in a safe place, it can actually be transformed.
That is a really freeing thought, that you don't have to be over it to be faithful.
You definitely do not.
And I love the idea that memory is an active thing. It's not just passive nostalgia. It's work. It's a form of resistance.
It is the work of keeping the truth alive in a world that loves lies. It takes effort to remember correctly. It takes effort not to let the narrative get twisted by the people who want to silence you.
Well, we promised a deep dive, and I think we definitely found the bottom today. This sermon by Philip Gibson really challenges us to look at those ugly parts of the Bible and the ugly parts of our own history with totally fresh eyes.
And not to look away. That is the key thing. Don't look away.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a thought from the source that has been rattling around in my brain. We live in a culture that just loves closure. We love to say, it's in the past, let it go. But Gibson suggests that peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth.
Right.
So here's the question for you to mull over. Is there something in your own life or your family's history that you are being pressured to forget just to make everyone else comfortable? And what would happen if instead of hiding it, you hung your harp on the willow tree and said, "No, I will remember"?
That is the question of the day.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.